Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, I move that Genesis Energy Limited be a public organisation for the purpose of standing orders. Mr Speaker, this is a process we've been going through with each of the mixed ownership model companies. As a result of Genesis ceasing to be an SOE and becoming a mixed ownership company, it ceases to be subject to ongoing financial reviews by a select committee. To ensure that Genesis continues to be subject to financial reviews, we need to put this motion through the House, which deems Genesis to be a public organisation under standing orders. That will mean that when Genesis' annual report is tabled in the House, it's then referred to a select committee for financial review. Following completion of their public offerings, MRP and Meridian were deemed to be public organisations in the same way. Air New Zealand is also deemed to be a public organisation and has been for some time. Mr Speaker, this is just part of the procedural tidy-up after the successful floats of 49% of these government companies. And Mr Speaker, the debates of the merits of the policy have been debated probably more extensively than any other single issue over the last 3 years, and the government is pleased to note that after that debate and the sale of the assets, there's around $4.7 billion has been put into the Future Investment Fund, and that's now available to be recycled into other public assets, which a process which is well underway and from which thousands of New Zealanders will benefit. And particularly I'm pleased to see that some of this money is going into the rebuild of Christchurch schools, where we have a generational opportunity to spend $1 billion on new schools and upgrades, and to change the way that the schooling system operates in our second largest city. And it's pleasing to see that so many of the members of the Christchurch educational community are involved in taking that project forward. Mr Speaker, well, the member's looking for some facts. I'll just give us some facts. The share offer program has increased the incentive for these companies to improve their performance, and this is now flowing into higher dividends for the Crown. It's particularly noticeable in the case of Genesis Energy, the company about which we are debating today. Despite selling just under half the shares in the company, the Crown expects to receive nearly twice as much in dividends from Genesis this year than it did in the best year in the decade up to 2012. So in those 10 years when the company was fully owned by the Crown, 100%, in its best year we received half the dividends that we will receive from Genesis Energy this year. So the taxpayer sold half the company and it's getting more than twice the return. And that makes a lot of sense. The opposition are going to get up and say that's because power prices went up. Well, they should look at the last CPI index, which shows that the increase in power prices was all due to increases in line charges from the monopoly community-owned companies. In fact, the power price, the variable power price, the energy price dropped very slightly. So the increased dividend, that is twice as big a dividend as the best of the last 10 years under Crown ownership, is not due to higher power prices. It is due to a better run company that no longer wastes taxpayers' money or tries to exploit what was a less than competitive position up till 3 years ago at the expense of the consumers of power prices. So, Mr Speaker, there are many other benefits from the floats. That is just one of them. And as a result of the Parliament passing this motion, select committees will have the opportunity to question Genesis Energy closely about why it's now paying the Crown twice the dividend when the Crown's a 50% shareholder, twice the dividend as it did when the government was a 100% shareholder. Actually, a similar but not quite the same pattern applies for Mighty River Power, which is also paying somewhere between 50 and 100% more dividend to the government when it owns half the shares as when it was 100% owner. In the case of Meridian, it doesn't work out that way because Meridian had a number of special dividends. And the special dividend that it paid, the very large special dividend it paid, was because it sold assets, actually. Well, it sold assets in Australia. It set up some energy generation in Australia and sold it very successfully. And I haven't actually done the calculations if you take that special dividend out, but I'm sure that once you remove that special dividend, we'll see there's also better performance by Meridian, taxpayers getting a better deal. The final point I'd make is this. The only reason the government has billions of investment is because ordinary Kiwis pay their power bills, and at the end of a week of working in the cold, wet July weather, they hand over $300 of PAYE. That's how we get billions. But just because it came in small amounts is exactly the reason we should respect it. We should pay attention to every $300 because if they kept it, they'd be able to do a lot with it. They'd be able to upgrade their car, pay for the school trip, buy a new washing machine. And that is why I'm so deeply opposed to the wasteful, arrogant attitudes of the opposition who think that the billions somehow belongs to the government. It doesn't. It belongs to people working in the rain and cold today, and this motion is part of a process that reassures ordinary New Zealanders, everyday New Zealanders paying their tax and their power bills, that the national-led government respects their contribution to New Zealand's common good, and we will make sure that people on good pay with good jobs who run these companies are thoroughly scrutinised, and most particularly scrutinised by a market that can signal very clearly by reducing the share price when that company is not performing.
I call the honourable member David Shearer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The reason